The common trope that regulation stifles innovation, I don't believe it. I think it's often a knee-jerk reaction by companies, by investors to evade oversight. But let's remember, though, that regulation can actually spur a more competitive environment, a more competitive market for them to operate within. It can set standards, enabling interplay between the platforms, which provides value to all of them collectively.
Hello, I'm Bruce Berman, the host of Understanding IP Matters, the critically acclaimed podcast series that provides leading innovators and experts a space to share their IP story. Learn firsthand about the strengths and weaknesses of copyrights, patents, trademarks, and trade secrets as they adapt to an AI-driven world. This is our 4th season. Brandy Nonachie is director of the CITRIS Policy Lab, a research center at UC Berkeley that focuses on the impact of information technology and deep tech. The lab addresses topical issues such as personal data privacy, digital access equity, AI bias, and the influence of social media on democracy. It includes the CITRIS Foundry, an incubator for tech-based startups. Brandy served as a Technology and Human Rights Fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School, at the Aspen Institute's Tech Policy Hub, and the World Economic Forum. Her research has been published or cited by the FTC, NIST, the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, as well as the Washington Post, BBC, and NPR. In 2024, Brandy received the San Francisco Business Times Inspire Award for her leadership in AI. She is host of Tech Hype, a podcast that looks at recent tech developments. Brandy's expertise includes information and communication technology law, policy, and governance. Her current work focuses on responsible AI and platform governance. Welcome, Brandy. It's good to have you with us today. Where are you speaking from?
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I am speaking from my home office and home studio in Woodland, California.
Once the technology gets going, it can evolve quickly, but not always in a straight line. It has never been easy to separate the good tech people from the bad. AI makes it even harder. How should we define responsible AI?
Ooh, that's quite the big question. I think defining responsible AI is very contextual. Also, the technology is dual use. I mean, it can have positive impacts in our society, simultaneously causing negative externalities. What's most important about responsible use of AI, responsible development, is taking stock of this careful balance between the benefits and risks and ensuring that we're putting in place appropriate either technical interventions or governance interventions to ensure that the balance leans in favor of the benefits.
What's the current status? I mean, are there any controls? I mean, there's some recommendations from the Biden administration in the US, and the EU, of course, has some more directives, specific directives. But where do we stand currently?
So the European Union passed the most comprehensive AI-related legislation to date, the EU AI Act, which is now in force. It places requirements on developers of AI systems who want their tool to enter the EU market, that they conduct risk assessments, risk mitigation, and that they communicate this to the European Union so that they can best ensure that if they are allowing an AI-enabled technology into the country or into the region of the European Union, that safeguards have been put in place and that residents will not be harmed. Now, the United States is a whole nother story. The Biden administration did make great strides in providing leadership on what does responsible AI look like. We had an executive order on AI, which charged several federal agencies with developing guidance, primary among them NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology. They charged NIST with developing something called the AI Risk Management Framework. So helping to guide those developers on how do you assess and mitigate AI risks. However, let me remind all of the listeners that NIST does not have regulatory authority like the Federal Trade Commission or the Federal Communications Commission. They can just provide guidance. They cannot enforce or require companies to implement the NIST AI risk management framework.
Now, with the Trump administration, we may have a different take altogether.
Oh, absolutely. We're already seeing that. The Trump administration overturned President Biden's executive order on AI. Currently, the Trump administration has a call out for what we call a request for information, is out to gather insights on what an AI action strategy should look like for the federal government. And I think the action part of that is very important, right? It's prioritizing adoption, action. Let's use the technology, which aligns very well with his corporate first ideals.
Isn't AI hard to regulate if people don't exactly know what it is, especially people in government who may be not immersed in it?
I'll give them some credit. Look, I think that members of Congress, first, they are dealing with a wide variety of issues on any given day. They might have a call about youth shelter care systems in the morning, and then wind turbine use as an energy alternative. So they have all of these issues they have to deal with. I believe very strongly that they have put a lot of effort into learning more about the technology, and especially having their staffers learn more. Because I myself have hosted briefings before members of Congress, essentially debunking the misunderstandings around what the technology can actually do. I was going to add that, a reminder to all listeners that even though at the federal level we do not have a comprehensive law governing AI, let's not forget that we have established laws that apply, right? If you develop an AI system that causes harm, as a developer, you could be sued under product liability tort. Or if you develop an AI tool for reviewing resumes and it's discriminatory, well, you can be sued on non-discrimination laws.
Rights also cover a lot of AI, but we'll get into that in a minute.
That's a murky area.
It's a murky area. It is indeed. But I believe that IP is actually healthy for AI, to regulate it and keep it in some lane, some positive lane. The internet and the so-called digital revolution have been liberating, in no two ways about it, but divisive in terms of privacy and ownership, especially when it comes to IP rights. Can AI as an industry learn from the tech experience in the 90s, from the internet experience? Is there something there that we can use?
Yeah, and I think that's already happening. Of course, if you were to post something on YouTube that uses copyrighted music, that would violate the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, and that video would be removed almost instantly. And that's because they've put, essentially a hash or what we call like a tag on that song. So it recognizes it and it says, nope, this is copyrighted. You don't have approval. We're going to remove it. The same is happening in the AI space, where we are looking at watermarking of AI. One of the biggest organizations is C2PA, the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity. They're working right now on how do we appropriately watermark content.
We had Santiago Lyon, who's one of the heads of that initiative for Adobe, I believe. We had him on. We interviewed him a few months ago. So listeners, you can look back and listen. It's actually very good. He's a war photographer, actually, by training. So he knows about fakes and the danger of fake images.
Yeah, of manipulation.
What about OpenAI? Is open source something that AI policy people are embracing, or are they more comfortable with proprietary code? Is it safer?
I would say it's pretty even split, honestly. There's the benefit of open AI models that can spur other startups, other companies, help the economy. On the other side, there is a concern that these open models can be co-opted by nefarious actors who can then scam, scheme and take advantage of our democracy. So it's actually, I think, a little bit of a tussle right now on which side we should go. But we've seen now in the European Union a push for open models, and it's pretty evident that they want to be able to use those models domestically. Of course, they have talent in those countries, but if they don't have access to these big models, these proprietary closed models, they won't be able to keep pace with the United States. So I'm definitely seeing, European countries are pushing more for open.
Interesting. Yeah, I've spoken to investors, venture investors, who really like the open source model because they feel it can enable smaller companies better, and I was kind of surprised that they're so supportive of open. But open, there's a place for it, certainly. It's an important a model, open source, and it has worked. To many people, copyrights and patents are simply exclusionary, monopolistic rights that benefit the rich and the powerful and get in the way of innovation. In fact, fairly applied, they level the playing field and encourage competition, but not everyone in the AI world agrees that IP rights are useful. Thoughts?
I actually, yeah, this is a good question because
I only ask good questions, Brandy.
Yes, you did. No, this is a big challenge because, look, if we look at some of the prior cases, there's a case brought by an artist, Anderson, against Midjourney, DeviantArt, and another, where Anderson actually held a copyright for their work, and they knew that their works had been scraped from the internet, used to train the model. You could essentially replicate the style via, a certain prompt in the system. And, unfortunately, even though that person held the copyright, the judge, sided with the platform saying, look, this is not what we call a derivative work. It's not a pure exact copy that's meant to undermine the value or exploit the value, but that it is transformative. Might have been a painting, but now it's this digital work that's different. So I think that there's a lot of discussion right now on what does that mean in the era of generative AI, whether or not something is a derivative work or transformative.
Yeah, it's a big issue. And what is fair use? Also, that's still far from concluded in AI.
Right. I mean, could we turn this on its head and also say, should I be citing my generative AI tool for the creation of an image? There's a lot of art and skill that goes into prompts. There's a whole burgeoning field of prompt engineers.
Absolutely. But the Copyright Office, which has no formal, I don't believe has formal decision-making power or legislative power, they recently came out with a report, the second of 3 reports, that said prompts are not copyrightable, except in rare instances where they enable a new creative work, which is kind of, difficult to discern sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah, that's quite interesting.
Yeah, it was about 3 weeks ago they came out with. I wrote a little something on my blog. But you have talking about copyright and writing. You have a master's degree in journalism, I found out. And what were you looking to achieve with that? And how did you go from journalism to policy?
Law and policy.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's important to communicate to the public, how does the technology actually work? What are the emerging laws and policies that are shaping this technology? So I pride myself on being a good communicator to a diverse audience, and the credit goes to having a master's degree in journalism.
Yeah, I think it's enormously important. I mean, there's a science communication group at Stony Brook that I think Alan Alda, the actor, started. I'm a huge believer in that. My background is more communications than technology, but I'm the guy who can explain it. Usually, if I understand it, then I can explain it. And if I was really bright and an engineer, I probably couldn't.
Yeah, I actually hear from a lot of people, wow, you're switching out, that $5 word for a $1 word so everybody can kind of cash in and understand what's going on. Simplification.
Yeah, well, it's important because these concepts are so complex. And now we're going to get into quantum computing. We are already, and that gets really tough. How important, Brandy, is transparency when it comes to content and inventions and aggregating their content? What can be done to improve transparency?
Right. So more about the transparency of the AI developers and how they're building their models. Is that the question?
If an LLM is using content, is gathering data, how is it being used? What data is being used? How is it being used? And how are users of the data that they aggregated using it? There's a lot of issues there, and it doesn't seem to be transparent to anyone. What's
And not
going on.
even the
Not
developers.
even the developers. Exactly.
No, exactly. So if we take Llama in their open model, that has 405 billion parameters, which is unfathomable to us. So actually being able to understand what connections are being made and how that relates to the final output is actually, I will sympathize with them and say that is quite difficult. So one thing that we're actually seeing is a move away from these very, very big models to smaller models, where they use a method called RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation. So imagine it's like ChatGPT, but when you query it, you've only allowed it to be trained on a specific set of data. That's the RAG component of it. And when you get the output, it will note where in that database it pulled that information from. That promotes transparency. So you know why it's giving you the answer. It's going to cite its sources. And we're seeing the development of that just booming right now in both the public and private sectors.
Wow. That's fascinating. Yeah. Transparency, of course, the Content Authenticity Initiative, CAI, they're all about provenance, such as provenance in art, where they want to know the origination, the source of the content. But it can be changed. It's not that it can't be changed, but you want to know when it's changed and who's changing it. And should they don't go that far, but I would say, and should the owner be paid for that change? If you're making a substantial change on something that is copyrightable and exists, someone has to track that. I think it's readily done, more readily done in copyright. I think we're seeing it with CAI, where they have kind of a file, a digital file built in, and it stays with the image. But we don't see that in the patent world. And I think we will eventually. The technology is here to do that kind of monitoring. I think some of the powers that be have that technology to choose not to use it that way. But that's another question. We'll get more into this in a minute. There's an incredible abundance of information, ideas fueled by technology that want to be free. I think Jonathan Barnett wrote about this in a recent book. I reviewed it. It's a very good book called The Big Steal. And he talks about Jonathan Barnett's at USC. I don't know if you'd know him. Well, yeah, he's great. He's going to be at our conference at the IP Awareness Summit on April 24th at the Dolby Labs in San Francisco. He talks about the cost of free, the high cost of free. Many businesses that can afford to not charge users for products or services to generate a following can well afford to pay for copyrighted content and patented inventions. They just choose not to most of the time. Sometimes they pay for it, but rarely. Sometimes this behavior can be legal, but is it ethical? It can be predatory and anti-innovation. So we're talking about ethics. This whole predatory mindset, they used to call it efficient infringement because it's efficient for shareholders, and that's about it. Now they don't like that word anymore. People are calling it predatory infringement because that's really what it is. It's legal in general. Some people would argue it's not, but is it ethical? What does it do to innovation?
Yeah, this is the question we're all facing right now. I mean, if you look at how OpenAI built ChatGPT, they scraped the internet, pulling in copyrighted content, right? There's a lawsuit between the New York Times and OpenAI currently. So we're seeing some of the other big players who hold copyright pushing back, and those cases will provide clarity on whether or not scraping the internet, even though that does not violate the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, because the content is publicly available. Now it gets murkier if the content is behind some type of password protected system, we're going to see, I think, these issues get ironed out in the courts, which is, again, back to my point earlier, the big difference between United States and Europe is that we give people rights to be able to receive remedy from harms, and that often happens via a lawsuit, yeah, which takes a lot of time to go through.
Yeah, and it favors certain businesses over other businesses.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. If you're one person and you're low on income, your income, you're busy, maybe you're a single parent, you're going to take the time to sue OpenAI? No, that would be too daunting.
To OpenAI's credit, they have been signing deals, I understand, with various content distributors and paying quite a bit in licensing fees. And that might be their separator from other AI, some of the open source models and some of the newer models, the smaller models, is that they have enough cash to pay for things. Now, whether they will or they won't, I don't know. I mean, certainly they've raised a lot of money and can raise more. From an IP perspective, I think that could be healthy, but we'll see.
Sam Altman just announced that the next iteration of ChatGPT, which will be GPT-5, that essentially being made available for free to the public at some advanced tier, some standard tier. Obviously, that indicates that you can probably get a more advanced tier and pay for those additional services, but right, this significantly advanced technology will be in the hands of many. So it sort of begs the question, with China's DeepSeek entering the market, where it suspiciously it suspiciously looks a lot like ChatGPT, and there's some speculation right now about why. Is this a move by OpenAI to incentivize consumers to use their tool and not these other open source or open access tools?
Mm-hmm. Could be. That's interesting. Yeah. Wow. While you mentioned DeepSeek, they're a different model. I mean, there are smaller language models, I understand, which are more focused on specific data sets, not all data, all the internet data. It seems like that's unwieldy, even though that's what some of the ChatGPT and others have been doing. Do you think DeepSeek will create opportunity, or that approach? It's a tenth of the cost, I believe, of what ChatGPT and some of the others have invested. But it also may be encourage a feeding frenzy of everybody going their own way with regard to AI. What's your thinking about that?
Well, I think that's already happening. There's so much hype around this technology that there's this sense of fear of missing out, where we see both the public and private sector, they're rushing to be able to adopt this technology or build their own. Even in the state of California, the state of Washington, we have executive orders specifically focused on generative AI tools and their adoption within our government. So we're already seeing this sense of FOMO happening.
I think California has its own law, or a law that it's talking about with regard to AI.
We passed 18 bills into law. Which is covered on Tech Hype. I encourage you to check it out. There's summaries of the 18.
It begs the question. So I think the valuation is over 150 billion, the current valuation for privately held ChatGPT, OpenAI, which is
that bubble will burst at some point, just like we had the .com boom. I guarantee. And there's an incentive for the hype. VCs want that. They want the hype around it. Cash in when they can, sell before it's too late, across a variety of tech companies that are publicly traded that might be using a similar technology. We can see this as inflating the value, just like we saw with the .com bubble.
So they may not make their money back in theory. Well, we thought that about Facebook and about Amazon 20 years ago, and we were wrong.
But they also, they diversified. They got into other areas, hardware, buying up competitors, which did not go under the radar of some smart judges and the Federal Trade Commission. So yeah, they've maneuvered and positioned themselves in ways where they can build that value. And it's also because that they're so big already that there's no competition.
It seems that way, but maybe now with DeepSeek, there will be. And I think, from what I understand, I'm not an expert at all in these areas. That Llama and Gemini, I think, are coming along very nicely. AI policy, Brandy, is obviously necessary. I don't think anyone would argue that we could just do without it. But there are businesses and investors who are critical about the impact of regulation. Surely it's a balancing act. Recent Copyright Office report, and we talked about this earlier, said that AI prompts are not creative expression, although they may play a role in generating it. They are more a tool for creation than creation itself. Can policy help to manage and sort out the role of AI? Or does the marketplace have to do it? Eventually it'll be done by the marketplace.
I mean, AI is so broad, right? It's almost saying, regulating the internet or, applying one law that applies to everything on the internet, given its great diversity of e-commerce, social media. It's difficult in practice. So like I said earlier, we have established laws that give people the right to sue and to receive remedy for any harms they have received. Now, the common trope that regulation stifles innovation, I don't believe it. I think it's often a knee-jerk reaction by companies, by investors to evade oversight. But let's remember, though, that regulation can actually spur a more competitive environment, a more competitive market for them to operate within. It can set standards, enabling interplay between the platforms, which provides value to all of them collectively. So no, I don't believe that trope. And I think moving forward, we're going to see more bills, especially introduced in the California legislature, that are specifically focused on AI. Now, this is not only because those companies, many of them are headquartered in the state of California, but because California is one of the largest economies in the world. Like we hear about the European Union and the Brussels effect, where it has this spillover that causes other countries to sort of fall in line. We have the California effect. It's a huge market where those companies want to operate. So I think we're definitely going to see the California legislature stepping up and putting forward more bills, even though we just passed that whopping 18.
Wow. Yes.
Yeah, 18 bills signed into law around AI.
Where California goes, at least with regard to technology, so goes the U.S., or so goes the world, really.
Exactly. We saw that also, right, with automobile emissions. California set a higher standard. What happened? The vehicle manufacturers fell in line. So now all 49 other states get the benefit of lower emissions.
Very interesting. AI needs to be managed, I think you'll agree, for privacy and fairness. But we as humans, we may not be equipped to do that. The speed, the volume of data, outputs of this scale is not something we've dealt with before. It may require other machines smarter and faster than, say, ChatGPT to keep up with the use and abuse. Are those machines being developed, or am I just imagining this?
No, and yes, absolutely. We've been using machine learning models to check, content. There's other methods, especially around privacy as well, where you can use some clever techniques from cryptography, like zero knowledge proofs, where you don't need to actually access the data, but you can query it in a secure way, where it just says whether or not that information is or is not present. So we have these other methodologies that can be implemented to best ensure that these tools uphold privacy and are non-discriminatory. However, I want to say one very important thing, that all machine learning models, all of them, are prone to bias and discrimination. And perpetuating those biases, there is never a tool that is completely free of bias. This cannot happen. NIST issued just an outstanding report a few years ago about the types of bias that plague AI systems. And in that report, they outlined, look, if you're addressing a type of bias in this category, it's likely you might be inadvertently causing another type of bias to occur. So what I think is most important around addressing this issue of bias and discrimination is transparency on what types of bias are you taking into account? Why those types of bias? How does taking account of those types and controlling for those, is that causing another to occur? And it's more about public trust, right? Communicate to the public what you're doing and why.
I agree fully. It's almost like we need bots to manage the bots, or to I wouldn't say battle them, but we're just not capable of doing it on our own. You can't eyeball this and say, "Oh, I know what's going on here." You need tools. We're almost out of time, Brand. This has been really enlightening and fun. What are a couple of thoughts you'd like to leave with folks? You at the Paris AI conference last week.
Right. Yep. The Paris AI Action Summit. It was quite interesting. It brings together global leadership from government, industry, civil society, academia. My podcast series, Tech Hype, will be releasing a video and audio for the podcast about the main takeaways from that convening. Which, to give you a little teaser, one of them is AI adoption at all costs, the increasing environmental impacts of AI, and another was how China, by us actually trying to restrict China's development of this advanced technology, has encouraged them to be more innovative, right? What is the phrase? Necessity is the mother of invention. And that in response to that, we're seeing our own policy strategies changing quite rapidly in response. So I hope everybody will check that out.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating. I'd love to hear that. So there is still a place for copyright and IP and patents in the AI world, I would hope, but only if those laws are clear, and they're not always so clear. Patents are so uncertain.
Well, that's why lawyers have jobs, right? Lawyers do the interpretation.
I think what makes...
and then a judge.
Sure. What makes creators and investors angry is not that there are laws or restrictions, that they're not clear. Because it's like in tax law. I mean, they come out with new laws all the time and restrictions, but once you know what they are, you can plan for them, or you plan around them or whatever. But in a lot of areas of technology, they just don't know. They throw out the notion of a patent and people aren't sure what it is. They're not sure how to apply it. Different industries apply it differently. It creates a lot of confusion, and folks benefit from that. What else would you like to leave listeners with regard to your work and regulation policy, the future of AI?
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting time, especially here in the United States. During the first Trump administration, we did see significant work toward best ensuring that the United States was positioned to adopt this technology in a way that benefits everybody within the United States. Keep an eye out for California. You're going to see a lot of bills being proposed, debated. The international stage now, right outside of the AI Action Summit, those participants are going back to their home countries, digesting what they had heard. And very likely we'll see some of the topics addressed there enshrined maybe in some laws in those countries. And I would please recommend everybody check out our show, Tech Hype, where we debunk misunderstandings around emerging technologies and the laws and policies that shape them.
Great.
It's at techhype.org.
Okay, great. And drops about what, once a month or so, or how frequently do you do it?
About once a month. Yeah, right now, except that with everything moving so quickly, right now we're trying to produce more content. Sometimes it's very hard to keep up with the ever-evolving tech policy space.
Yes. Well, thank you for your time. I know you're busy. You're just in Paris a few days ago, and you have family and other responsibilities in teaching, and I thank you for this. This is great. Understanding IP Matters is brought to you by the nonprofit Center for Intellectual Property Understanding with the generous support of its partners and sponsors. Gain access to all 4 seasons by subscribing for free on your favorite platform or email us at explore.understandingip.org. Content conveyed is for informational purposes only and does not represent the views of CIPU or its affiliates. This episode was produced by Jack Shields for Wild Creek Studios. Thank you for listening.